systems. Keeps you pretty busy. It's a lot of fun. There's definitely a lot of work in the area doing defense, either on the 50 side or on the 80 side here in Sacramento. Let's see. I work with Linux on a daily basis, but not Ubuntu. Most of the defense department uses Red Hat or CentOS, so that's what we're doing most of the time in our offices. We have a bunch of boxes in my lab where we're running Ubuntu. That's just because the tools are a little newer, actually a lot newer, and it works a lot better for our development work than the stodgy old CentOS and Red Hat stuff that we have to use for customer deliverables. I put together some checklists offered for the test VM I was going to run through. These are largely based on stuff that our team in Rockland was using for the first round competition. Stole it from you guys, thank you. But I added some comments, added some sort of reorganization of the way I guess I would take, the approach I would take for executing those same instructions just slightly differently. Really have much help, you have to wing it. And our checklist is how we, it's what we can rely on, right? We bring that in the door with us. It's something that we can practice against, and it's something that we can drill at home. And then when we run into something unexpected, we at least understand there are some services, there are some users, we know what to do with those. Those are familiar things to us. And so given this little instruction, we can go. So Optimus is an admin, Wheeljack is an admin, Blaster is an authorized user, and Bumblebee is an authorized user. And SSH is the critical service that we've identified for this VM. I hope this feels a little bit like a contrived example like you might find in a competition round. I tried to make it a little bit more silly. There's a system banner. It looks a lot like a US government system banner. It says, you are using an Autobot information system, and it's provided for Autobot authorized use only. And this is the kind of thing that you might find in a real system where these just have to be there. They notify you before you log in that you're accessing a system, and they warn you that you might be breaking the law or doing something that you don't want to do by accessing the system in an unauthorized manner. And the idea here is you need to make sure this banner stays in the system. And what you'll find is as you do system updates, the file that this banner is stored in will get updated. And you'll have to take action as a user, as a maintenance user, to make sure that this message remains present on the system, even as you do system updates. The last one is there's an Autobot symbol. There's a checksum here provided for what the graphics should be, and there's a download. It says our human allies have provided a backup for us on the Earth internet, and so if you really needed to, you could go download that file and push it up onto your VM. But this is just a really simple scenario. It tells you a little bit about what you're doing, tells you a little bit about who the good guys and bad guys are, and tells you what you need to secure and make sure is safe throughout the competition. And it's really simple, right? Make sure the system banner is good, make sure the Autobot symbol is good, make sure SSH is running, and make sure no unauthorized users are on the system. Here's the checklist. So we looked around our forensic tasks. At this point, we should be looking for where that Decepticon image is and how we can find out how to restore the Autobot image. We really just want to find out where that thing is in case it gets wiped out as part of our updates. We don't want to lose it, so we can't put the Autobot symbol back. Does that make sense? It's something relatively obvious. We should be able to look for the image throughout the computer, see something recognizable, and latch onto that and say, that's the thing that's wrong. I want to put the Autobot symbol there instead. In this case, there's a download link. But if you look around on the command line, or if you look around inside of a file explorer, what you'll find is the bad guys didn't do a very good job. They're kind of lazy. They just left the file that used to be there saved in the same directory. So if you're paying attention, it's a really quick fix. You just rename that file and you're done. If you're not paying attention, there's still a parachute for you, right? You can go download the file brand new, verify the checksum is good, and put it in there. And around that time, you get a little ding, you get some points, and we move forward. So, everybody following me, okay? Kind of, nothing crazy just yet? Okay. So number two, we need to get started on our updates, but the first thing you need to verify is that you're updating files from an appropriate source. If there are some third-party software there, you need to make sure that on Ubuntu, there are these repositories on the internet that have lists of files that are up to date. And what you need to do is you need to pull down those lists of files first to make sure that when you make your system up to date, you're getting the latest. In general, that's because there's sort of an arms race with security, right? There's people trying to exploit your computer, and there's you who just want to go do your daily business. And if you don't keep up to date, what you'll find is that those people are pretty determined to get into your computer, and they will find their way in. And it could be someone next door to you being silly. It could be someone in another country with more malicious intent. It could be the guy down the street with malicious intent, I suppose. But in general, you want to go to the internet, pull down the latest, and at least know what the latest is so that when you go to update it, you're getting all the right things. So inside of Unity, which is the Ubuntu desktop, which I don't have at the moment, hey, actually I do have an ISO. We'll get that started here in a few minutes. But from Unity, you can select the software and updates icon, and it'll list a bunch of different menus. Inside the Ubuntu software, there's a bunch of different kinds of Ubuntu software that you might want to pull down. Main, Universe, Restricted, and Multiverse. And then there's other software, which is not from Ubuntu, not from Canonical, but it's from someone else. And so Canonical Partners is the next repo you might want to pull down. Maybe this is Firefox. Maybe this is Google Chrome. But it's not the Ubuntu source. It's someone Ubuntu works closely with to make sure that their software works properly on their system. And you might have that software installed on your VM with a competition that you need to update. So by pulling this repository in, we make sure we grab the latest references to those files. The next tab you'll see in the UI is updates. It really just wants to know what kind of updates are you interested in. We're interested in security updates, more generic updates, backports. Backports are really things you might have installed on your computer that aren't being normally updated, but someone else updated them. So we took their fixes and we backported them over to Ubuntu, and we made them available for you on 14.04, whereas those changes normally may be only available on the bleeding edge Ubuntu. So those backports are helping you, and you want to remain open to that. Last thing, automatically check for updates daily. Make sure you check that. Download and install immediately when you have security updates. You want to check that too. And as soon as you save that, you'll start noticing your system start to complain to you, hey, there's some updates out there on the internet. You might want to grab those. And you can handle that right away, or you can wait a little while. I'm going to suggest at this point, it's good to drop down to the command line and do an apt-get update. So we talked about pulling down package lists from the internet so we know what the latest stuff is. Update needs to know which package lists it's going to check. And that's what we did in the previous step. We pulled it, Canonical Partners, all of these Ubuntu things, trusty security and updates, backports, and now we tell it to go fetch those latest lists. So that's what the apt-get update's doing. Is everybody familiar with what sudo does? Sudo, whatever. The idea is that you need to assume administrator privileges temporarily, take some action, and you're an authorized user who's allowed to assume those privileges. So you're listed in a file somewhere that says, Wheeljack is a trustworthy Autobot and he's allowed to become admin temporarily to maintain the system. And so we're going to do a sudo apt-get update because apt-get is touching a database that shows us where the latest stuff is. And you can imagine that databases are sensitive. If someone were to corrupt that database, it would be an impediment for you to get the latest updates from the internet. So you want to make sure that that's secure and protected. Let's see. So the first step didn't really touch the system a whole heck of a lot. All we did is make sure that we're connected to the internet in a way that helps us identify the most up-to-date software, and we refreshed our list of what is the most up-to-date. This is analogous to reaching out to Microsoft and saying, show me all the updates in Windows Update window. You haven't yet pulled them down and installed them, but you need to know what they are so you can either pick through them and prioritize, or so that you can just pull them down in mass. Let's see. Sean?
Yep.
Could I ask you to do a little dance for a while? Sure. Try to get this game going?
Sure.
Thanks.
So let me ask you this. How many of you are middle school teams? Is that all one team or different teams among you? Are you all together? So what school are you guys? Toby Johnson? Are you all Toby Johnson? What school are you from?
Toby Johnson, but like it's just ice cream.
So you three in one team, and you guys in another team? Awesome.
I'll be on it.
Albiani, thank you. So we got Toby Johnson represented, we got Albiani represented. High schools, what school are you guys from? Rockland High. How many of you are from Rockland High? This whole area, okay, excellent. You guys are lucky, you got your adult leaders with you and everything. We got Elk Grove High School. Elk Grove High School, good. Any other high schools represented?
Casa.
That's what I did see you guys registering online. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Round 2 is going to determine your tier. And I don't know how much you've looked into this. Maybe you've done this before, but top 30% goes to platinum. If you're in platinum, you have a chance of going to championship. If you're in the middle 40%, you go to gold. You can still go to regionals, and you can still be regional champions. If you're in the bottom 30% performers, you can still go to regionals and be regional champions. Last year's silver open regional champions, at least one of them is in the room today. And he's hoping to go platinum this year. They're on track for that. But what I want to say is this. No matter what tier you land in after your round 2 performance, you can still be champions at the regional level. And we're hoping to have somebody in the Sacramento region actually go to the championship. We need to knock down LA a notch or two. All right, LA Unified has been a powerhouse. They've been doing it longer than most areas. They're a center of excellence, so they get a lot of attention, a lot of money thrown their way, and they're a big district. We're the 5th largest district in the state of California. I think it's time that we put our foot down and get our place among the other grades. If you've been tracking, California kind of lost the championship to Alabama, and then was it Georgia that had it last year? Does anyone remember which state got it last year? I think Alabama was 2 years ago. So who are we going to take it
I
from?
think it was Georgia last year.
Georgia last year. And I'm talking open. I don't know the all services division that well. But are you guys all services division or open?
We are, we're our school combined. We have
Some in each. Okay.
We got platinum in our all services.
Excellent. Okay. I think Luther Burbank had an all services team do quite well in silver last year. I think they were category champions. But I couldn't figure out, I think it was silver category champions for the West region. There's 8 states that you guys are competing against in the West region. So if you can manage to be champions for the West region, that is saying something. What questions do you have for me? I'm a math teacher, okay? All I know about cybersecurity is what I learned from watching you guys and listening to your mentors talk to you. Let me ask you this. If you're going to behave as though you're going to nationals, then you need to have your first 5-minute plan. Because you get a 5-minute head start before the red team starts messing with you. And they come in and they change your settings on you. So what's going to be your 5-minute plan? Firewall? User accounts change passwords? What do you lock down in those first 5 minutes before you start going and looking for other stuff? Who's got some ideas for the room? Call it out.
I'd definitely go with the firewall first.
Okay.
Just because it slows them down and allows us to get a little bit more ahead of them.
Are you going to do it manually, or are you going to try to write a script to do that for you? So a push of a button, done. Something to consider, right? Because if you're limited on time, you have 5 minutes to lock out the red team. We might need to know some PowerShell. We might need to know what are some other scripting languages that you guys have been kind of dabbling with? Anyone? What are you dabbling with in terms of scripting? PowerShell. Is it called Bash? You tell me when you're ready.
Almost.
Okay. Is it called Bash? What operating system do you use Bash for? Is that for Ubuntu? Okay. What's the one that sounds like Bash but is not Bash and you use it for Windows? I would get those two mixed up. Maybe it's just my bad hearing. Is there one called Batch? No. Batch script? Okay. See, I'm the novice in the room. These things all sound the same to me. But is batch for Windows, or is that for, okay, so we got batch for Windows, batch for Ubuntu, and PowerShell for, I think now, isn't it for multiple platforms?
I've only seen it on Windows.
So it's only Windows, okay, so PowerShell is mostly Windows. Someone was telling me they're coming out with a new PowerShell. I thought that would work for Ubuntu, but they could be totally wrong, I could be totally misleading.
There is Bash for Windows now. So if you decide that Bash is your tool of choice,
Okay.
the Canonical guys ported Bash over.
Okay.
Like a mini Ubuntu system running on your Windows computer these days.
So if you learn what he just said, then you can use it for both. And you won't have to learn multiple scripts or scripting. Why do I recommend that? It's because that's what everyone else is using. When you look at the scoreboard, I don't know if you guys have done this yet, but when you look at the scoreboard this coming weekend, click on one of the top teams. When you click on one of the top teams, you see the graph of time versus points. Look at the slope of their graph. When they jump 20 points, it's not because they manually keystroked into these windows and manually changed things. No, they wrote a script. They pushed a button and did several things at once. When you go compete in person in the championship round in April or so, I don't know how much scripting you're going to be able to use unless you write it right then and there. Because they restrict digital media tremendously at the championship level. When you're doing these online competitions, you kind of have a little more flexibility with digital media. You know, you got your Google Drive, you got all your stuff ready to go, and boom, get it, apply it and stuff. Okay, so we got scripting, 5-minute time. What else can we lock down? Firewall. What else can we lock down? First 1 minute. Yes?
Probably user and admin passwords.
I like that. Certainly administrator, because they got the most privileges, right? So you get into the administrator, you make sure they have a password and a strong password. Not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? Okay. Do you guys use password generators? Do you know they exist? Yeah. There's password generators that exist that allow you to, at a click of a button, get a very strong password. The problem with that is you've got to write it down. You better write it down because you're not going to remember it. And what some people do is they type it into a text box. Maybe this is bad. Okay, mentors, tell me if I'm wrong. You type the password into a text box and then you copy it and paste it. Is that bad practice? That is bad practice. Okay, you heard it here first. It's bad practice. Don't do that. Don't copy and paste passwords. Learn to type it in always. Learn to type it in always. And that's why you have it written down so you're going from the source every time. Because you don't know what you're copying sometimes. You might think you're copying one thing and you copy a space by accident. That screws you up.
If you got the file like that, it'll end up going out to your trash folder like that, and people could sniff that in a heartbeat.
Okay. Then,
And then
yeah.
that's your password.
So don't copy and paste passwords. Type them in every time. Okay. All right, so we've got administrator password reset, good. Firewall, good. We can't do any offensive stuff. We're only defensive, right? Right? We're following the rules. How many of you have actually looked at the rules book in this room? Students. I'm talking students first. Any students look at the rules book? Good. No, that's good. That shows discipline. Anyone else? We should all look at it, myself included. We should all look at it. It's just so intimidating when you see it's got like 100 pages, right? Or more now, I don't know. We're in the 9th year of CyberPatriot. They gotta have a rule for everything or else people are gonna argue about it. When you go in the rules book, you will see all the states and what regions they're in. So if you're curious to know what states we're competing against for Western region, you can find it there.
Sean, I'm ready to go.
All right. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Silva, and I'm available all night.
Okay. So we were able to get a little Ubuntu VM running. We can run through some of this real quick. This is the Unity button on top left. We're going to type in software and updates. As long as I don't type through something. Maybe I should have given it a lot more RAM. We'll see. There we go. So software software and updates. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of these little icons that talk about software. Software updates, software store. Software and updates is where you get to set those repositories if you're going to pull down lists of updated software from. So the canonical one says main in parentheses on the far right. The community maintained universe, proprietary drivers, restricted. Let's see. I did not want to uncheck those. Software restricted to copyright or legal issues with the multiverse. In the other software, we want to click canonical partners. For updates, we want to make sure these are all three checked. We want to download and install automatically security updates. It's looking pretty good over here. Let's see. I think we're good. There's a little bit more about how you verify that the guys on the internet are who they say they are. There's some security authentication going on. Here we go. It's immediately telling us we're out of date and we should pull some stuff down to get caught up. I definitely encourage you to get a few things running simultaneously. Should be able to download updates, install updates while you're doing something else in another window. This VM seems determined to prove me wrong, but in general, I think you'll find your productivity increases by having a few windows going simultaneously. Okay. So another thing about most systems, Windows and Ubuntu both, when you're doing an update operation, either pulling things down from the internet to be updated on what packages are available, or pulling those packages down, there's a database somewhere being fiddled with, being updated. And while that's happening, you can't install something else simultaneously. You'll find the same thing on Windows, the same thing on Ubuntu. And so we try to encapsulate those operations so that they don't mess with us as we're doing other activities. So do an update. And this update hits all the places that we told it to previously in that little graphical interface. So that's great. So the next thing that I wanted to do was before I start pulling down updates, before I start locking things down, I need to make sure those tools, those firewalls, the SSH server I was told was very important, the PAM, which is the password authentication module, these things all need to get pulled down from the internet, so I have them at my fingertips. And I want to do that immediately before I start updating the rest of the system. That might take tens of minutes. I'd like to get this going right away. So I call these my Triode Utilities. I want to look around the system, see what I can see, figure out what kinds of things I think I need to do, and so I'm going to pull them down right away. Have them separated out with a bunch of backslashes here, just so that you can see what the things are that we're pulling down. That way, maybe make it a little bit more obvious. This is not fun. It does not want to let me cut and paste nicely. The good thing about putting all this stuff up on the internet is I can cut and paste it from within the game. So what am I installing here? I'm installing Bash. By default, Ubuntu comes with Dash, not Bash. And so I just want to make sure I force the issue and force Ubuntu to pull down the tools that I'm familiar with, even if they're not the default. Other tools getting pulled down, ClamAV. I couldn't get the ClamAV virus database to update for me today, so I'm going to have to find another option. But I wrote these instructions before I really had a chance to play with that this morning. GKSU is a graphical toolkit for doing pseudo operations. Sometimes you need to actually run a GUI, like Nmap later will run ZenMap. And you want to run a GUI, but you need to be root to run that GUI effectively. And GKSU is a tool package for GNOME, which is the desktop environment that Ubuntu is using here, that we're going to use to assume those permissions and work with the GUI graphical environments as an admin. Go ahead.
So is Nmap allowing configuration?
I haven't seen anything about Nmap being used in the competition or being denied. In this example, we're going to use Nmap to scan ourselves. We're just going to take a look at ourselves and see very quickly what we can find. What you'll find is that tools like Nmap are purpose-built to generate reports of what they find. And if you use a tool like that, you don't have to scan through everything. Nmap's meant to scan many computers across the network and find their vulnerabilities and see what they're doing. It can be used by bad guys to look at your network, but you can use it also to look at your own computer. In this case, it's a lot easier to look at one computer than it is hundreds of computers, and so it's a lot easier to digest that report. We're just looking at ourselves. Okay. Also installing libpam-cracklib. This is a password cracker that you like. It's helping you to crack your passwords in the background all the time, just to tell you if one of your passwords is bad. That's the idea. So it helps you to ensure that your passwords meet some basic security profiles and that they are complex enough. Let's see, we have lsof. This is a tool I use a lot. It tells you if there's any open files. Sometimes you can't delete something, you can't change something because someone has the file open. lsof will tell you who has that file open so you can take action. Nano is an editor that I highly recommend you look into if you don't have an editor of choice already on Ubuntu. Nano is pretty easy to use. I'll pull it up right now. The thing about Nano, it has a shorthand for all of its commands. That little caret is meant to be shorthand for a control character. So you hold down Control X to exit. And that can throw you the first time if you've never seen this before. But Nano's pretty easy because it's kind of a what you see is what you get. It feels a lot like a word processor. You can use the arrow keys and move around. It's pretty easy to go. There's no steep learning curve involved. And it also says, hey, you've made some changes to this file. Where would you like me to store it for you? By default, it tries to help you to not lose your changes.
Does that work perfect for backing it for?
Yeah. So Nano is a modern clone of Pico. And Pico was being used as the email client when I was in college. So you'd log into Pine, and by default, your editor was Pico. So I'm a little bit familiar with it, but I haven't used it since the late 90s. It's been a little while. Let's see, Openssh Server. That was one of the critical services that our little scenario prompt told us we needed. And so when you install Ubuntu Desktop, what you'll find is you have the SSH client tools, but you don't have the SSH server tools. So it's important for you to run a server and be a resource for others on the network. If that's part of your scenario, you need to install that service. That's what Openssh Server is. Terminator is a terminal. I find Terminator is quite a lot nicer than the default terminal application. One of the things that's nice is you can split the terminal shell sort of arbitrarily. When you decide you have another thing to do, you can just split it and keep going. It's quite nice in that respect. UFW is our uncomplicated firewall. That's the firewall we'll be using today. And then Vim is my editor of choice. I installed it because I like to say that Vim is awesome. You don't use Vim unless you're willing to deal with its steep learning curve for the power it can offer you. So I'm going to install some convenience tools. HTOP is pretty handy. I forgot that I don't have that paste. Here we go. And GUFW is really just a graphical interface for managing the uncomplicated firewall. And ZenMap is just a graphical interface for managing Nmap. So you could certainly have a script to take care of all of these installs for you. You could certainly just run through them instead of talk through them, and you probably get through them in a couple of minutes. But you realize the network update itself takes a couple of minutes. So if you're pulling out a bunch of packages, you do have to trade that off in whether or not you can afford that kind of time. If you're in a scenario where 5 minutes from the beginning, someone's going to be actively working to stop you from doing good things. So now we've got these tools installed or installing. It's time to look ahead and see what's next. The next step is configure the firewall. And so some of you had suggested we should go configure a firewall. And I totally agree. You want to lock down that system in very big steps. You want to get a big hammer, and you want to start fixing things real quick. The best thing you can do is set up a firewall, open just the ports you're told to keep available, and lock everything else down. And a typical firewall has that exact security posture. It says, I will lock down everything unless you tell me otherwise. So in this case, we're going to install UFW. Here's some examples. Sudo UFW allow whatever service you want. That's very specific. You say, I want SSH, and UFW is going to figure out this guy's got Openssh Server installed. That's the SSH of choice. I will make sure that Openssh Server is the only application that can run SSH on port 22, and it's very, very specific. You can also say UFW allow port/protocol. You can say I want to allow port 22 TCP, and that's a little bit more general. You're just saying let the port be open. I don't really care who's running there. And that's sort of asking for someone to impersonate the SSH server and do bad things on your computer. The last one, UFW allow port, is very non-specific. It doesn't care if it's TCP, UDP, RTP, some other protocol. It's willing to open that port 22 and listen indiscriminately. So I strongly suggest you use the UFW allow and name a service. That's the example here. Run sudo UFW allow SSH. And UFW's intelligent enough to see that we have Openssh installed. And just like that, UFW is configured. Not started just yet, but the idea here is there might be some other things that as you progress through the competition, you decide you need to secure. And syscontrol is one of the interfaces on Linux that you can use to dig into the network stack and stop people from getting in. You can disable IPv6 if that's not important for you. You can disable, I think I suggested like reverse path filtering, IPv4 forwarding is pretty typical. You don't need to do that unless you're a router or acting as a gateway. You can develop your own best practices, and I encourage you to investigate syscontrol as you get further in the competition and learn what it is and what it can do for you. I think one of the examples that you guys found was a syscontrol to disable like a SYN flood. So if someone's trying to hit you with a bunch of TCP connections, like a denial of service, they might hit you with the simplest possible packet that would cause you to do a lot of work. And so they just want to establish a new connection and then go away, and then have hundreds of thousands of their friends try to do the same thing and keep your server very busy, unable to do its function. And so by turning on the SYN flood filtering inside of syscontrol, you can make yourself more robust and handle that case a lot better. So we've got our firewall all sort of set up. I want to jump into the next big thing. And again, if you're on Windows, you want to get your tools figured out, whatever sysinternals tools or whatever things you want to use to triage your Windows system. Then you want to go through and set up your firewall. The next thing I think you should do is really look at your user accounts and make sure that at a first glance, nobody who shouldn't have admin access has it, and that you've locked down the typical avenues of attack. No guest accounts, no default administrator accounts, or if you do have them, they're disabled. You don't really need to delete too many things, but the first cut is just turn them off, make sure they can't hurt you, and then come back and delete them later if you needed to do that for the points. You can go figure that out later.
Question. In was it the practice round or some previous round, did anybody ever have an automatic administrator login when you open the image? Like it tells you in the scenario, it logs you in under a certain person? Does anyone have any memory of that kind of situation? Just me. Okay, never mind.
It's actually very typical, right?
Is it
If you have a single user system and you are yourself an administrator at home or at work, you might want to sit down on your computer and have it immediately at your fingertips, ready to go. And so you don't want to have to log in. Your office is closed. You kind of trick yourself into thinking and becoming complacent that this is enough. But really, entering your password is the least you could do to make sure that your computer is being used by you when you want it to be used and not by someone else when you don't want them to be using it. Really, because you have no control over what someone else is doing, you want to make sure that you're in the loop when someone's using that computer. But yes, on Ubuntu, you can say like default login on this user. On Windows, you can do the same thing. Let's see. So how do you manage user accounts? How many people have seen Etsy password, Etsy shadow, Etsy group, Etsy G shadow? Hands? Okay. What do you do with them?
ETC password. Well, it's like change the password policy, sorry.
It's not where you change password policy, but it does show you. It does show you that your passwords are shadowed. If you go into Etsy password, you'll see an X inside the shadow area, inside the password area, And it'll show you that your passwords are encrypted and saved in the shadow file instead of open to the world of the password file. Typically, you'll see Etsy password and Etsy group. They're available for anybody to read, but only an administrator can write to them. Whereas Etsy shadow and Etsy G shadow, those are actually only to be read by the administrator. And the reason is there's a password hash in there, and if I am a determined attacker and I have lots of computers at my disposal, I can go figure out what kind of password I can enter. It doesn't even have to be the same as your password. That would give me access to your computer just by creating a collision of the passwords I'm trying and this checksum, and this hash. So inside shadow and G shadow are the passwords. They're encrypted, but you don't want to give people access to them because if they take them home and crunch them, they will break into your computer. It's just a matter of time. And so we create long passwords, we create very difficult encryption, but it's just, it's like an arms race, right? We're trying to do as much as possible to stop people from easily breaking into our computers. But there's a limit to what we can do, and there's a limit to how much effort we're willing to put in, how much into it, and how much inconvenience we're willing to put up with. Okay, let's see. There's some user account data in the home directory. Don't go ahead and delete home directories. You might need that for your forensic information. But once you've decided you don't need them, you can always look inside the Etsy password and see where someone's home directory is. You can also see what their default shell when they open terminal is going to be. So only administrators who are listed in the sudo group or the admin group or the ADM, which is another type of admin group, really have blanket sudo access. And what you'll see is if you look in Etsy group, if you look into Etsy group, you'll see exactly which users those are. So let's take a quick look. So this is an unprivileged file from a reading perspective. Anybody can look inside. And I see inside of admin, the syslog guy and my guy who installed the system, Wheeljack, both have access to this system. And if I go further and I look for sudo, I see Wheeljack is the only sudo user. And this is a shorthand for sudo. Instead of editing the sudo file, which I'll tell you is dangerous, and there's a way to make it safer, and we'll go over that later, instead of having to edit that file, you can just add a user to the sudo group. And assuming you have admin access to add that user, you're in good shape. That user now has administrative privileges, and you did not have to muck with any files that could potentially be catastrophic for you as an admin or your system in general. So let's see. So that was just a little bit of a blurb about managing user accounts. Really, if you look at the checklist, it just says, we shall manage user accounts. And you've developed your own techniques. You maybe have your own references for how you want to do that. Here are some of my notes that I put together. So the first thing I want to do is I want to lock down accounts. The most valuable account is root, or my administrator account. So I want to go lock that down. And I sort of took a safe method. I'm only willing to lock the root account like this, sudo password-l root. There are other things you can do to lock it down. I'm not entirely comfortable with those other things, at least not for the root user. I did test it today just to make sure that it still works with this version of Ubuntu, but it scares me a little bit, so I don't do that. The next couple steps, though, are available for all users and totally safe. You lock the user, and then you say, this account expired 1 second after 1970, January 1st. So you basically say that the account is dead, done, not going to accidentally be used, and unless they change the time on your computer, that account has been like stopped and burned with fire. It's not going to come back accidentally. Whereas if you accidentally put a 0 instead of a 1 there, you basically said turn off account expirations. So you do need to be very careful with the commands you're using. The next command undoes what we did. It says -u for unlock the account, and it does -e-1. Instead of -e1 to set the expiration, it says reset the expiration, and -1 is sort of shorthand that says there is no expiration on this account. So that's an easy way to unlock an account that you accidentally locked down. Notice we haven't deleted anything yet. Sometimes you need these users to be there so that you can see what they're doing. Find the config files they're editing. People tend to save them in convenient places where people are, working through things. They're not necessarily covering their tracks as well as they could. They're busy people. And so you can look in their directories and see old versions of files, and you can maybe restore those files. So deleting home directories, not always the best thing to do this early in our activity. We'll do that later if we really need to. You can disable the guest login. There are many ways to do this. And every time you get a new version of Ubuntu or a new version of Windows, that way might change. And so this is the way that worked for me in the last couple days on this version of Ubuntu. I go into the Lights DM. Lights DM is the desktop environment. And in the Lights DM config, there's a Ubuntu config. You say allow guest equals false. That'll stop people from being able to log in as guests. You guys see that earlier when we logged in? There was a little thing at the bottom left that said you can log in as guest. Let me show you.
So I have a random question.
Yeah.
Has anyone in this room figured out what operating system they're going to announce later this year? Have you seen that? No? Some of the coaches received a document from me months ago, feels like months ago, called Escalation of Difficulties Throughout the Season or whatever. And you'll see from round 1, round 2, round 3 or whatever, after state, I think it's regional, in the regional round, they give you 3 operating systems that they name, and then a 4th one that says they're going to announce a new one. And my curiosity is, has anyone been able to figure out from what you've heard, if there's any rumors, do you think it's a server? Do you think it's some new Windows thing they're going to throw at us? What have you been thinking? All right.
Like Internet of Things has been a really big thing lately.
Well,
And-
it's supposed to be an operating system, so it's a
and-
new
and
operating system.
Microsoft has versions of Windows that run on small embedded devices. So that's what I do every day. I work on small embedded devices, and that's naturally what I was kind of leaning towards. It would be
Okay.
interesting to see them throw out an operating system that you could run on a tablet or a little computer sitting on a table at home that costs $20 or $30. That might be kind of fun.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But I want to put that little seed in your mind, try to predict what that's going to be. Yes?
There's also some speculation that it's going to be Windows Server 2016 since it released earlier this year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're just holding back on telling us.
Our version of server's just as old as our version of Ubuntu. It's one major release behind.
Okay. All right.
It's good, right? It's good to use a version that's a little bit out there. It's been there for a while. People know it well. They can talk to you about it, teach you a lot about Linux, teach you a lot about Windows. If you use the newfangled stuff, it's a lot harder to find people who know it as well. So anyway, this is a quick view of what the guest login looks like. You can just click login with no password, get access to my system. I don't like that. So we're generally going to go disable that. And we'll go open a file up real quick just so we can take a look at how to do that. We're doing on.
We're doing fine. Does anybody need a 5-minute break or less? Because it's only 90 minutes, so I thought we could squeeze it in. It's about 7:30, so we got 30 minutes left. Does anyone need to do a quick break? Are we good? Let me hear from you. Are we good? All right. We'll wake you guys up.
I managed to crash my VM.
And this happens.
Not
This
doing
is
very well today.
no, but see, this is something that we have to be expecting, be ready for. This happens to us all. Yes.
So we got into trouble because we crashed, and I thought, oh, we'll just open it up on a different computer. But you have to delete
that
them.
one.
Yeah,
Yes.
I didn't know that.
And then re-extract the file.
Right.
So okay, here's a lesson learned. When you break your operating system and you can no longer log in, because ours was we got locked out. We couldn't log in anymore. You literally have to delete that instance from wherever you're running it from. You have to go back to the zipped folder. You have to re-extract the files to create a new instance, and then you start back at 0, people. Now, usually, at least it has been for my students, if they've done it once, they can do it again and do it faster because they know exactly what got them the points. So they only do what got them the, well, I don't know if you only do what they got the points, but they go through it much faster. But that's how you redo if that happens to you.
Yeah, take notes, right? Your
Take
checklist will probably be a
notes.
superset of what you actually find. So know what the points are, keep track of them, and you'll be able to run right through it.
Plus, when you crash your machine like that, you better make sure you know what you just did and don't do that again. So taking notes, having a checklist is huge because you're literally checking these things off, and when something breaks, you go, oh, I just did that, and it's already written down. It's when you exhaust your checklist where it gets interesting. Because then you're Google searching. Oh, this doesn't look right. What is that? I can't tell you the number of times my students start the 6 hours knowing this much, and then during the course of those 6 hours, they know this much more. Because that's what they were able to learn on the fly, learn on the job. You're acquiring this skill of being able to learn on the job. So keep growing, keep learning more.
So which computer system did your guys run into that crashed hard and didn't come back? We had an Ubuntu system in round 1 due to
Well, in the practice round, I think it was always the Windows machine, but that was because we ramped up the RAM to like 4, and we learned that we couldn't do that, at least not for that image, and we had to keep it at 1 or 2. CyberPatriot, the home office, keeps saying, don't change the RAM on the virtual machine. I just think to do 1 gig of RAM is ridiculous. So I test that theory, and what did we choose this last round? 2?
2 gigs.
We were conservative. You did 3 and it worked fine?
Yeah.
Okay, so you heard it here first. You can do 3 and it's fine. If your host computer has 8 gigs, in years past we were able to do half. And what happens is when you do half, it's half for the virtual and half for the host. You can't do more for the virtual than you have for the host, or what's it called when that happens?
You run into paging file issues, other things that go on.
Yeah. So it was always our practice, split it by half. And we had no problems with the machines that we were competing on. Then we go to Sierra College and have all these blue screens of that. So what are you going to do? You adapt for the situation you find yourself in for that moment, and you learn from it and go forward. But
That's why in our security classes here, we run 8 to 16 gigs.
on the host computers? Good. I don't know what the gig, I thought they were 8 at Sierra College. When we checked the specs, they were 8, so I didn't know why we were crashing at 4. Maybe it was something on CyberPatriot's end, I don't know. You got 32-bit or 64-bit operating system?
Probably something local they have running on their box.
Okay. I don't think we ever
We
figured
run
out
on
why.
crash and burn, and we basically run our own hard drives how we need them, just like you would at home.
Okay,
So we don't run into those kind of issues here.
good.
Which version of
And
Windows?
then later, when you guys are interested, you go to the National Cyber League Challenge. You can do offensive
Okay,
strategies. So that's what we do here too. We've taken the bronze and silver a couple times.
that's awesome. Question was
What version of Windows were we running at the practice?
Windows 7, I believe so.
Okay.
We used to do Vista, we used to do XP. That's not happening this season, at least. And they used to not tell you. Back in the day, you show up day 1 and then you figure out what it is they're giving you. But now that they give you the whole season ahead of time, it's almost like cheating, it feels like. But hey, we'll take what they give us, right? Mr. Silva.
Oh, I was just going to share that as a cautionary tale towards the end of this checklist, there's a check rootkit tool, which sounds like a good idea, looking for malware on your Linux box. But it turns out check rootkit doesn't work really well on Ubuntu, it works, but you need to understand its limitations. So what happened is check rootkit decided that the init process, that program, was suspicious. And one of our enterprising students decided to delete the init process. Unfortunately, the init process is the first process that runs on your Linux system when it boots up. So when those guys tried to reboot their VM for whatever reason, it couldn't. And so we sort of said, okay, you're probably going to have to restart this VM, but we'll take a look and help you confirm that it's bad in the way you think it is. Sure enough, there's a way into the VM, but when you get there, nothing's running. It's very, very simple. And so we confirmed for them that they were heartbroken and that they should not delete the init process. And in general, the internet's there for you as a resource. You can look and say, check rootkit flags erroneously the init process all the time. And once you find that posting, and you find it again, you start to believe it. It's probably not just an isolated incident. It didn't happen just to you or just to some guy on the internet. It happened to a bunch of folks, and it's a well-known thing. We just never saw it before, so we didn't know. That's one of the nice things about these rounds where we have internet access. We can check that out. So this is the light DM config file we were talking about earlier before the computer crashed, or before the VM crashed. And you can just type into it, allow -guest. You can type properly. Equal false. You Control X, save it to the same file name. And now we've disabled the that guest account. Okay, so going through what we need to do to lock down our user accounts. This is what someone else talked about earlier. How do you lock down the password? Do you reset the passwords? Do you set the password complexity rules? In this case, max pass days says how many days a password can be valid for. And min days says you have to have had that password for at least a day before we're willing to let you change it. And pass warn age says when you're running towards the end of that 90 days, we'll give you a warning 7 days before it expires, so you have time to think up a new password and come prepared to change that. All of those are being stored in etc login.defs. And the next thing we want to do is actually lock down all of our passwords so that if we change our password, we can't go back to a password we have run before. And so there's a finite amount of memory the computer's willing to devote to that check. And we tell it here, remember 5 passwords. So blanket 5 passwords for every user will be remembered. And if you try to reuse that password, we'll say, sorry, you've used that before, try again. You've probably seen this before if you try to change your Google password online. And the last thing, also in the etc-pamd common password file, is you want to set the password complexity. In this case, what I do, 3 retries, you get to check your password 3 times. Diff-OK says, did you make a tiny little difference between your password and try to skirt by the password rules? If so, we're going to flag it for you and tell you you can't do that. Ucredit, how much credit do you get from a password complexity perspective for having lowercase characters in your password? U is uppercase, and L is, of course, lowercase, and the D credit is digits, and O credit is non-alphanumeric characters like exclamation points, question marks, hashtags. Max repeat, how many times can you have the same character consecutively before we flag it as a violation? And then min-len 12, just throw out a number, 12 characters per password. What it really does is says how many credits you need in your password to have a valid password. If you want to know more about that, the internet would love to tell you. But suffice to say that this is a pretty standard password complexity rule. It's nothing crazy. 12 character passwords are pretty reasonable. Let's see, what else? Oh, so we've set up our passwords so nobody can make a new account that has bad passwords. We've locked down the firewall. Now it's time to actually go take away privileges from folks. And we're going to disable their accounts. That's the first cut. We're going to exercise the practice of least privilege. We're only going to give them the privileges they need. So if you need admin to administer the system, we'll give you admin. If you don't, we'll bust you down to a normal user. And that's just a principle of least privilege. It's very simple, but it's also very critical. You don't want to allow the users to do too many things when they don't need to, partly because you won't get points, but also because it opens the door for malicious users. Let's see. We're just waiting for an opportunity to have more access than they really need to. At that point, you can go reset the passwords. I think the practice we follow is reset all the passwords for all the accounts except the one you're logged into. And you can reset them based on your password generator to these horrible passwords that you've written down, or you printed out, or you've saved on another computer. In this case, we're running on a VM, right? So it's very convenient. You always have another computer handy to save those passwords on. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So in Ubuntu, you have this handy GUI, graphical user interface for managing user accounts. If you got your window way too small, you might not see the unlock button on the far right of that interface, but in this case we can. So once you type unlock, as an administrator, well, once you type unlock, it'll prompt you for your administrator password. And from then on, you can create new users.
How many of you guys have already downloaded the competition images? They were released already. At least we got them in an email. I don't know if you noticed, but a few days ago. And you always want to get those downloaded and check the checksums. Nothing's worse than installing a copy that has a bad checksum. That's happened to me before. I've learned the hard way on most of these things, and I'm trying to make sure no one else has to learn the hard way. Good thing.
If you've never used this interface before, it may not be clear that that's a button over there that says standard. It as you jump between users, come on.
I do have copies of the competition images on my flash drive, so mentors or coaches, if you need those from me before you leave tonight, just let me know. I'm slowly passing the flash drive around.
So Bumblebee's a standard user, but if you mouse over it, you can see that it's selectable, and if you click on it, you can see you can make him an administrator just that easily.
Excellent.
This is a little bit of like orienting yourself to Ubuntu, whereas you may have already known how to do this on another operating system or another flavor of Linux even. Let's see. The sudoers file. So we talked about the sudo group and how do you modify the sudo file without messing it up for yourself and everyone else. There's this tool called vi sudo, and if you open with vi sudo, you can fiddle with the etc users file in a safe environment. So in this case, it says vi, but it's not actually using vi, it's using nano. It looks at your editor of choice, and it helps you use that editor. In this case, we defaulted to nano on Ubuntu. But in this file, you'll see this shorthand, %admin, which is a group that doesn't exist on Ubuntu 14.04 by default, and %sudo. These are groups that you can find in etc groups, and these define the kind of privileges that they have. So in this case, sudo can run any program as any user on any group, and I'm trying to remember what the last one is. I don't recall. But the idea is, with sudo, you can do more than just become root. Wheeljack could become Bumblebee. And so you can assume someone else's identity using sudo and do things on their behalf. And that might be a way that an unprivileged user is allowed to do things that they wouldn't normally be able to do because they're in the sudo group. They can now become the root user, they can become another user, and assume those privileges that those users have. Go ahead.
Why may you use nano over gedit?
Well, on this computer, it's really giving me problems, and it's a little slow. So gedit's going to pop up a new window, it's going to take a little bit more time. I'm a programmer by trade, so I try not to get my hands off the keyboard. So if I have to use a mouse or poke at windows, I feel like I'm like in the penalty box, it hurts. So I try to stay in an editor that keeps me on the terminal. So it's personal choice. Gedit certainly works. I have developers that I sit next to, they love gedit, they use it all the time. I'm a VI guy, so I don't really use nano that much, but I try to remember how to get in and to get out of as many editors as I can. Because sometimes you'll find that that's the only thing you have. And you can muddle your way through the kind of little edits you might need to do, but if you can't figure out how to save your document and get the heck out, then you can't do your job. So it's really good to have a few of those tools at your disposal. Emacs is another editor that people seem to love. I'm not a big fan. So if you're editing the sudoers file, before vi sudo became a thing, you would first, I guess this is back in the day now, you would become root on your shell. And you'd have a root shell sitting around as already a privileged user, so that if you did something horrible and locked yourself out of sudo, you still had a lifeline to go fix that file. This is a no-no these days. You really shouldn't do this unless you're mucking around with the etc sudoers file. Just in general, because of sudo, you can assume root permissions just for that one command or two commands you need to run. There's really no significant value in regularly becoming root and executing as root. But you'll notice, it does help you figure out that you're root. In this case, the root prompt has a hash or a pound sign instead of a $, just to show you that you're the root user visually. In this case, it also says root edit user. There's a couple different methods that they have at their disposal to let us know what we're doing. The next step I had after you've locked down your user accounts, you've disabled a bunch of users, you've changed your password policies. Those will take effect immediately, by the way. I decided antivirus seemed like a reasonable thing to do. In this case, ClientID didn't work for me, so I'm going to skip over it. But find an antivirus that you're comfortable with that runs on Linux, get comfortable with it, put it into your checklist, and have it at your disposal so that you can identify things that are suspicious. A lot of their cybersecurity investigation will be truly an investigation. You're looking for things that don't fit. And an antivirus is a good way to find things that don't fit. Let's see. Okay, it took a really long time to get here, but now we're finally ready to bring our critical services online. Why? Because our firewall is there, and our user accounts are locked down. And so we've done a lot of the basics so that when we bring these services up, we're not exposing them to users that really shouldn't have access to those services. It could be a website, and we don't want somebody else to push things out onto the web that we don't want them to. It could be SSH. We don't want to give people, who knows what SSH is? Good. Okay, so SSH is secure shell. The idea is that you can get a terminal, much like this, right, from a remote computer, and you can reach into a remote computer like you could reach into an Amazon computer and fire up a computer in the cloud and SSH to it and get onto a command line and interact with it. And from that command line, you could run GUI programs. You could run your gedit, you could run ZenMap, you could run Firefox, and you can run GUI tools if you set things up properly. But the key here is SSH lets you get another prompt on a remote computer, and in this case, our scenario is that this was an important service for us. So in this case, we're going to go through and make sure that SSH is configured properly. There's a config file called, it's a little bit hard to read, isn't it? Etsy SSH SSHD config. There's another config file, Etsy SSH SSH config. SSH config is for the user tools, the client tools. SSHD config is for the server. And so you're going to lock down the server by making sure permit root login is no. I'm not quite sure why this isn't the default. I suppose it's very convenient to be able to log in from one computer to another as root, but in general, I don't like to do that. It causes lots of security folks to freak out. Let's see. Oh, so if you have any additional SSH lockdown operations that you need to perform, you can lock down how many concurrent SSH connections can be allowed. You can lock down, you can change which port it's on. By default, it's on TCP port 22. You can move it to whatever you want. In general, that practice fell out of vogue. Nobody really seems to want to move SSH off of port 22. That immediately causes someone scanning your computer to become very suspicious of what you're doing and start looking at you a little harder. If you leave port 22 open and you just don't let anybody log into that, that's a little bit more incognito. You can always open SSH on a secondary port also and use that one and not use 22. You just leave 22 out there so you look like everybody else. Does that kind of make sense? It's a little bit of misdirection. You don't want the attackers to think of you as an interesting person and drill down harder on you. You look like everybody else and you go about your business. Let's see. And now we're ready to bring up the service. As a best practice, when you start something like SSH, you'll do a restart instead of a start, because you don't really care if it started or if it's being restarted or if it's being started from scratch. What you'll find is if it's not already started, you'll get an error when it tries to stop the service and then start the service. But as long as you know what state you're in, I just installed SSH, then I configured it, I'm bringing it up. The best practice is to really run restart almost all the time. At least that's the best practice I found very useful. You run into less problems describing to someone, restart the SSH service, then start the SSH service, and they get an error that says, SSH is already running. Then the person on the phone says, what should I do next? If you told them to restart, they're already good. I do a lot of remote support. Let's see. Okay, so now we're at the fun part. It becomes a little bit more of a hunting game. We're looking for bad things. We've already done a lot of the basics. We've got a firewall running. We've got an antivirus that we've run at least up one scan. We've got our accounts locked down fairly well. We've got our SSH service up and running. So if it's critical, we're doing what we're supposed to do. And now we start looking for things that look suspicious. I outlined a few of them that are typically suspicious. FTP, Telnet, RSH, our login, VNC, TFTP, NCAT, NetCat, NC. On the VM I was preparing, I tried to have a fun, contrived example of how the Decepticons log into your computer and use NetCat to leave a backdoor for themselves. I neither finished it nor did the VM actually work for us tonight, so unfortunately I can't show you the fun thing. But the idea is that these technologies provide remote access to your system in one way or another, and almost all of them have been determined to be largely insecure, and people don't tend to use them unless they have to. At work, I have a server that does TFTP. At work, I have a server that does VNC, but the way we use TFTP and the way we use VNC are very specific, they're very prescribed. TFTP lets you read and write files. We only let you read our files. We don't let you write new files to us. VNC could allow anybody to connect, but we require you to SSH in first and use your SSH connection to then connect to VNC. So we provide multiple barriers to users so that we can retain the technology we find useful, but secure it as much as we decide is necessary. Netcat, NCAT, NC, they're different flavors of the same kind of tool that does the same kind of thing. They do it very differently. So you'll find people have a love of NCAT, and NC is a little bit no frills, but NC is installed by default on your Ubuntu desktop system. So you might actually have to go in and uninstall NC if you want to get the points because someone is using NC maliciously against you. Let's see. Other suspicious services, if you don't need files to be served out to the network, then you don't need the network file system, NFS, right? You don't need Samba or SMB or SIPS, which is another Windows-based or Windows-compatible file sharing file server software. You don't need an NTP daemon if you're not going to be a network time protocol server. Let's see. If you need those things, then you'll have to either be familiar enough with them or know what to look for so you can Google it and figure out how to set that up properly. NTP in particular is very specific. You have to set it up in a very specific way in order for it to operate well. And you also have to make sure it's up to date. There were some major NTP vulnerabilities just about a year ago. I had to patch all my systems at work. It was a huge pain. But these things are, they're happening on a daily basis. Let's see. Typical web servers I threw in here, Apache. A lot of people have probably heard of Apache. We've got like HTTPD, Nginx. Nginx is not just a web server, but it's also a reverse proxy. It provides like a kind of like a Yahoo Google portal for all of the services that you might hide behind a reverse proxy. So you have one place to go to, and then once you reach my website, I show you all of the websites that I'm proxying for, so you can choose which of them you might want to use. In my lab, I have a bunch of devices, and those devices can't be seen on the corporate network. So I have a reverse proxy, and the reverse proxy is a legitimate player on the corporate network, and it provides access to all of these devices that sit behind it in a prescribed way that security folks at work have decided is acceptable. Let's see. Typical FTP servers might be VSFTP. There's a daemon called XINetD that has FTP and TFTP built in. You might find XINetD being used.
FTP was one of the vulnerabilities in the last round too, I think, for Ubuntu.
Yeah, so with FTP and Telnet and RSH, the big problem is your passwords are being passed plaintext. So if somebody's sitting there looking at your traffic on the network, they're seeing your password as you type it in. And there's no encryption for the password exchange, and there's no encryption for, there's really no attempt to hide what you do. I use Telnet at work when I need to send unstructured text to someone and they are too stupid to understand how to parse it or how to decode it. But you only use it in the cases where you believe it's safe and you're on an environment that you control. You don't want to have Telnet on a computer connected to the internet that anybody can hit. Similarly, you can convince yourself that your computer systems at work are safe and that you have them under control. But I have mine on a separate network. Nobody can get into them. It's in a lab. It's locked. I convinced myself that it's good enough. Let's see. Typical SSH may include OpenSSH. Dropbear is another low resource SSH service. Be on the lookout for multiple SSH servers running simultaneously. I talked about this earlier. You might have it running on the standard port 22. You might also have it running on port 2022. You might just hide SSH in plain sight, and then, you might have an SSH in plain sight and hide another one that you're actually the one you're using, and no users are ever allowed to log into that first one. And you put that out there as a honeypot to encourage people to attack it and decide that you're not interested and go away, whereas you keep yours for your system access. Used to be that people would just change their TCP ports for SSH all the time, and I think what happened is people got wise to that, and as soon as they saw you didn't have anything on port 22, and they thought you were a remotely administered machine, they started pounding you with even more scans. Let's see, so Service Status All is a good program to help you figure out what services are installed and running, or installed and not running on your system. In this case, we pipe to less. Here, we'll take a look at what that looks like. So we do that vertical bar, and then we type the word less. Less is a pager, and the joke is that less is a pager that replaces a pager called more. Less is more. But less allows you to hit the enter key and move one line at a time down a lot of output that would otherwise just fly through the screen. And you can hit the space bar to go jump through a bunch of output. You can also hit the slash and the question mark to search around through your content. But in general, less is a very common tool for taking lots of unstructured data and slowly thumbing through at your rate instead of at the rate the computer can spit it out. So you can see UFW plus is set up to run. You can see a bunch of other services are uninstalled but are not actually running. What else do we have? Oh yeah. So at this point, we're trying to figure out, what should be here, and so we need to figure out what is installed on our system. There's a lot of ways to do that. Sometimes you're going to use the GUI and you're going to go look through a huge list. In this case, you can use dpackage, and you can ask the Debian package manager. Ubuntu is based on Debian. Debian is yet another flavor of Linux. But you can ask the dpackage tool what things have been installed. Let's see. This last section is good to go through, but I don't really have anything for us to find today, so it's not going to be very interesting. But it's good to scan a VM that you stood up and see what kind of services are there typically by default. And then when you see something different in competition, you'll know the deltas, and you'll see they'll pop out at you as odd, and you'll then investigate a little further. A little bit of an example of how to use Nmap, another example of how to use ZenMap, which is a GUI for Nmap. Another example of how to use netstat. All of these tools look at the network interfaces on your computer and ask the question, what services are running, what ports are they using, what protocols are they using, and then you have that information at your fingertips so you can audit it and decide what looks good and what looks fishy. Hey, finally got to the point where we're ready to go delete some stuff. If you don't need any of these programs anymore, you can ask apt-get to purge them and automatically remove them because they are no longer traceable to anything you've asked for in your computer, and maybe they're there from prior to the update. Some things got installed. And the last section is really, this is kind of fishing for points. There's 100 points, you've got not 100, and you'd like to go look for more. And so you might delete users at this point. Really, you shouldn't have to delete users, but you can try it. There's a couple of different ways to do it. Here's a couple that I've recommended. You can use the Dell user program, which is a convenient Ubuntu tool. And then here's just a cautionary tale of check rootkit that we talked about earlier. And then just some credits to the local team in Rockland who pointed me some useful checklist material and CyberPatriot archives that had some of the material that we referenced. That's about all I've got.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Silva.
Yeah.
Can we all thank him for his time tonight? Now, the hard copy that you got, I'm going to make sure I make it available as a digital copy. I'll be broadcasting it through email to all the coaches and mentors on my list. So if you didn't get it tonight, I'll definitely be giving that to you. I want to make sure that the coaches here tonight, the mentors here tonight, touch base with each other. If you have questions for one another, or if you want to pick anyone's brain before we separate, because we rarely have this opportunity to do this kind of regional gathering and share. I really want to make sure that we're a powerhouse in the region, and that's only going to work if we collaborate and point things out to one another. I know that there's some students in here that were among a team that got 200 points on this last round. If that is helpful to you, then you should maybe seek them out and pick their brain a little bit. I don't know if they're willing to share or not, but I know that my school had one team that did 200 points, or 194. FTP was our kryptonite, unfortunately, on Ubuntu. And this is me just gloating, not gloating, this is me wishing we had gotten the FTP, because after we crunched numbers and did the math, if that team that got 194 actually finished the FTP and gotten their 200, they did so well on the Cisco quiz, they would have been 40th in the nation in the second round. But we weren't. We almost were, but we weren't. they were 122nd, another 203rd instead. And the other team that got 200 points and did okay on the Cisco were 122nd-ish. So if you guys don't know where you ranked in the second round, what I want to encourage you to do, or from the first round, what I want to encourage you to do in the second round this weekend is, 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, go to the scoreboard and copy and paste it into an Excel spreadsheet. You're going to have a lot of garbage at the top, but you can delete the images, you can delete extra rows, get down to that top team as number one row, and you can let Excel count for you, and then you find your team based on your known score. You are going to have to sort it by total score though, so if you are on the top row, far right side, total score, click on that down little drop-down menu and do largest to smallest. Once it sorts, the only variable is when you have all those teams that tie, I don't think it pays attention to who did it faster than who. If it does, great. If it doesn't, then that's the only part where it's not an accurate ranking, but it's a ballpark figure. So if you haven't been able to find your ranking before and you'd like to, that's how I've been doing it, is throwing it into an Excel spreadsheet, letting Excel count, because I'm not going to count 2,217 teams. Get out of town! But I think it's neat to know where you fall. I think it is. And that way you know if you're improving from year to year. You can say what you did last year and what we're hoping to do next year. Alright? Is there any questions that you have for me? If I don't know the answer, I'll work on getting it to your team. Yes?
Sean, did you mention, I know that Steve Lincoln just sent out, and you had sent it out to the coaches, the videos that are out there that he did to make sure everybody would want to look at those.
Did you say 20 hours worth or 12 hours worth?
20 hours, I think.
20 hours worth of approximately 20-minute long videos for cybersecurity training. He went to Florida to film this. And when I looked at the opening website, it looks like he was in a studio. So it looks like a professional job. And I sent that out. I can send it again. But I really want to encourage you guys to possibly incorporate that into your weekly meetings, or send the link to your students and have your students look at it on the weekends. I don't know about you, but students are already pre-programmed to look at YouTube videos. Why not throw some cybersecurity videos their way when they're in between things? So I don't know yet, because I haven't watched any of it, how much it pertains to CyberPatriot, but it does pertain to cybersecurity, and that's the business that we're in. So you're going to have to be able to find some gems for sure. Now, if it's 20 hours worth, and the state round is the first elimination round, you should start planning out how many of those videos you can knock down before the chance of elimination. Now, I hope none of you get eliminated. I hope all of you get through to regionals, because I want to see a lot of your team numbers on that scoreboard in the top 32 or top 132, whatever. And you can look at tier advancement on the US.cyberpatriot.org website to learn what you need to do within your state. Problem is, California is the most competitive state around. We have a lot of good teams, and so some of us have to hope for that wild card because I think it's the top 3. Is it top 3 go on to regionals? I think it's the top. We'll have to look at that. It's all on the website, so you can find out for yourself. Just look to tiers and advancement, and it'll show you exactly what to expect. Other questions for me? Well, I want to respect your time. It's about 8:04-ish. You guys are welcome to take off. I'm sorry about parking tonight. If I can figure out better logistics, I will. But we've all been here once. We can do it again. I don't have another date for us yet, so watch your email inbox. Once I have another date set up, I'll let you know. Any other questions?
You did a survey to find out what operating systems people were most interested in?
Yes.
What was the answer?
So Ubuntu was the top operating system, and then the second and third topics were Cisco, quiz, content, and packet tracer. And so the next regional training I was hoping to center around Cisco products, Cisco practices, that kind of thing. Because I gotta tell you something, a lot of people can get 100% on the images, not everybody can get 100% on Cisco quiz. If you can make your mark in the Cisco content, you're going to jump ahead of other teams that tie you on the vulnerability count. And that's what the team at my school did when they got 196 on the vulnerabilities. They got, I don't know about you guys, but did you notice that when you did the quiz, it gave you a score right away out of 50 points? Did you notice that? No? Well, my team showed me on their screen when they finished the quiz, they got a score right back, and one team was 40 out of 50, another team was 47.5 out of 50. But when the results come out, what was your Cisco score out of? Like 22. I don't know how that works. I don't know. I mean, I can do the math and figure out what the ratio is, and figure out a multiplier that might have worked. But I haven't heard back from CyberPatriot what they did to those 50 points to whittle it down to 22. Did they throw problems out? Or did they just have some funky point system? Tell us one thing and use something else. I don't know. It's a work in progress. Yes?
Do we need to download the packet tracer program again?
7.0 is the version that they've told us to use, at least for round 1. I don't think they're going to change the version from round to round. That would be kind of silly.
That's the newest version, so.
Is that the newest version? Okay. So we're going to be using Packet Tracer 7.0. Start working in that environment, learn those tools, and be ready for round 2. I'll tell you right now, Packet Tracer round 1, if you submitted something, you got the 5 points. Yay. It was just a discovery. Could you actually create something and submit it? But I doubt that round 2 will be as forgiving. So you really got to go through those Packet Tracer tutorials. If you have the instructor version, they have tutorials in the help drop-down menu. I don't know if every program does. I haven't learned 7.0 yet, so I don't know if it comes with tutorials or not. But I'm using
There's
6.
There's a set in there, it works pretty much the same way. The only thing different is it goes out to the web more.
Okay.
There's a few more appliances. There's actually a PIX firewall in there, that kind of thing that I don't think they're gonna ask for, but.
Okay. So definitely go through the tutorials. You're going to be expected to create a network that can transfer data packets through the devices, learn how to configure the devices so they can talk to each other, learn what kind of cables to use, get familiar with the, I mean, when you click on the device, you see the back end of it and you see all the ports, right? This is what I've picked up standing behind my students and just watching their screens. I don't know any of this stuff, okay? I trust you guys to learn it all and take care of us, people that don't know. Any other questions for me? You know I'm only an email away, if I don't know the answer, I'll try and get it for you. If it's about the competition, I will say this. Use the info@usrpatriot.org email address to get answers from the source, because that's who I go to when I don't know. And so if it's about the competition, you can ask them directly, because I kind of got in trouble a little bit because I was sending a question, and then the person I was talking with sent a question also, and they felt, now we're doing double the work. So just have them email us directly. But if you want my input on coaching strategies, team dynamics, things of that nature, what's worked for me, what's not worked for me, feel free to pick my brain through email. But if it's anything dealing with what is CyberPatriot going to do to us next round, ask them directly. Any other questions? I'm going to try to edit this video and get it uploaded to my YouTube channel and get the link to your coach so that you can review it at a later time if there's something you missed tonight. We really try to pack it into 90 minutes or less. So if it was going a little too fast for anybody, you can review it at a later time. Anything else? Going once? Going twice? Thanks for coming tonight, everybody. Have a good night.